Hello, how are you? Today we are going to look at the lost education of Horace Tate, a legacy of courage and education through leadership, through the lens of Bowman and Deal's four frames. Before we start talking about each frame individually, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the text just to remind you. So Vanessa Walker, the author, restores the history of the remarkable life and contributions of Horace Tate, a visionary Black educator and activist from Georgia whose leadership through the Georgia Teacher and Education Association, the GT&EA, helped transform the fight for educational equality in the segregated South. More than a biography, the book is a revelation of the secret network's strategic advocacy, and moral courage that defines Tate's career and the work of countless Black educators who labored behind the scenes to advance civil rights through education. Dr. Tate began his career as a teacher and a principal in the era of the Jim Crow segregation, when Black schools were systematically underfunded and Black educators were denied fair pay, resources, and political voices. Rather than accept these inequalities, Tate became deeply involved in the Georgia Teacher and Education Association, or the GT&EA, an organization that paralleled the all-white Georgia Education Association, the GEA. Under Tate's leadership, the GT&EA became a far more than a professional association. It became a vehicle for organized resistance. Tate transformed it into a politically astute and strategically aligned institution that worked quietly but effectively to challenge educational segregation and racial discrimination. Because overt protest was dangerous for Black educators, they could lose their jobs, they could lose their pay. Tate and his colleagues developed covert strategies to advocate for equality. They gathered evidence on disparities in school funding, teacher salaries, and student resources. This information then became crucial in civil rights lawsuits. Through trusted networks, Tate maintained secret communication with the lawyers from the NAACP, Legal Defense Fund, and shared data that would later help build the legal case for Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. Tate's private papers reveal the extent of the underground activism. These documents expose how Tate served as a key liaison between Georgia's Black educators and the national civil rights movement, blending his role as an organizer, advocate, and protector of those who could not speak out safely themselves. So before we move on to the actual going into each individual frame, I'm going to just briefly give you an overview. Dr. Horace Tate's leadership through the GT&EA can be clearly understood through Bowman and Deal's four frames of leadership: structural, human resources, political, and symbolic. In the structural frame, he builds organizations, data-driven systems of advocacy, and creates professional networks that collect evidence and support political reform. His leadership also embodies the human resource frame as he prioritizes the well-being and professional dignity and empowerment of Black educators. Tate also mastered the political frame, and it was evident in his ability to navigate the power dynamics of segregation, forming alliances with national organizations like the NAACP, and negotiating with state leaders to push for gradual but meaningful change. And of course, the symbolic frame. He transformed teaching into a form of resistance, framing education as both a right and a pathway to freedom for Black children. Let's look first at the structural frame, right? Focusing on organization, roles, policies, and systems. In this frame, Dr. Tate's work demonstrates how Black educators built parallel education systems to serve Black children during segregation. Tate and his colleagues organized networks of Black teacher associations, the GT&EA, and they structured around clear goals and objectives, like collecting data, lobbying, and publishing reports to improve schooling. They spoke out about helping children and wanted what was best for the children that they served. These systems were meticulously planned. They had structure, accountability, and strategy, mirroring formal bureaucracies, even though they operated outside the dominant white educational power structure. Tate exemplifies strategic organizational leadership, creating systems that function under constant constraints, a hallmark of the structural frame. So next we have the human resources frame, where we're focusing on people, needs, relationships, and empowerment. Tate really understood the value of human capital and morale. He nurtured and mentored teachers and principals, advocated for their professional development and their dignity. He secretly collaborated with others in the Black Teacher Association and the NAACP, highlighting deep trust and empathy and a shared purpose. His leadership acknowledged the emotional and moral toll of racism while empowering educators to persist for the greater good. This is reflected in the human resources frame, viewing people as the organization's greatest strength and addressing their social and emotional needs. Even the activities that he held, the meetings that he held, and all of the events that were held by the GTENA all come underneath this human resource frame. Next up, we have the political frame. So we're looking here at power, conflict, negotiation, and resource allocation. This is perhaps the most important frame in Tate's story. He operated in an era when education was inherently political, battling for equal funding, teacher salaries, and school resources within a racially oppressive system. Tate and the others worked covertly with civil rights organizations, leveraging political networks and influence to challenge segregation policies while minimizing personal risk. His success depended on his ability to negotiate power structures, build coalitions, and advocate effectively. He did this in many of the meetings that they had at the GTENA when they discussed the situations that they were involved in and how they could support the NAACP. Tate was a master of the political frame. He used strategy, alliance building, and advocacy to drive systematic change. Finally, we have the symbolic frame, focusing here on culture, meaning, ritual, and inspiration. Tate also embodies the symbolic frame, shaping meaning and purpose within the struggle for equal education equality. His work represented hope, resilience, and the moral power of education as a liberation. Having a group of people come together and have rituals around their meetings were also a big part of the structural or the symbolic frame. He preserved a sense of shared identity and pride among Black educators, even under oppressive conditions. His leadership was rooted in vision. He framed education as a sacred mission and a symbol of freedom. Through the symbolic frame, Tate became a cultural and moral leader, embodying the deeper values of justice and empowerment. So to bring this all together, the 4 frames: structural, human resources, political, and symbolic. Structurally, how did Tate embody this? He built organizational systems to support Black educators. In human resources, he supported and empowered teachers as professionals. Politically, he navigated segregation power structures strategically, and symbolically, he inspired meaning and identity and purpose in the fight for equality. Horace Tate's leadership cannot be understood through one frame alone. His story of covert resistance, organizational advocacy, and moral conviction shows how effective educational leaders integrate all 4 frames: structure for stability, human connection for empowerment, politics for influence, and symbolic for enduring meaning. So hopefully that will give you an overview of exactly what Bowman and Deal may think of Horace Tate and his journey in the segregated South educational system.